headlines. UN nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, says an aged North Korean reactor the regime said it would revive for a deterrent capacity last year may be operating again. NATO leaders tackle a packed agenda, everything from the threat of Islamic State militants to the Ukraine crisis and Afghanistan. And the IFA Consumer Electronics Show kicks off in Berlin with new smartphone-centric devices like smartwatches taking center stage. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Live from Seoul, I'm Kang Chery. We begin with the exodus of Koreans heading home this weekend for the Chuseok Thanksgiving holiday. An estimated 40 million people will be on highways, byways, and railways over the next couple of days. That's up 13% compared to last year, as people aim to make use of this year's extended 5-day holiday period. Travelers hoping to get an early jump on the rush began packing train and bus stations earlier this morning. Most tickets for destinations in the southern part of the country are sold out for Saturday and Sunday. The roads are slowly becoming congested as we speak. The roads are expected to be the most congested Saturday morning, according to the Transport Ministry, as well as Monday afternoon, when many people will be beginning their journeys back to the capital region. And President Park Geun-hye has posted a holiday message to the country on Facebook, vowing to do her best to breathe new life into the Korean economy so that all Koreans can lead happy lives. She said, just like the full moon, she hopes the country comes together in a full circle to boost the economy so that all Koreans can enjoy prosperity and happiness. The president then went on to thank those who have to work over the holiday, including policemen and firefighters, and wish them, as well as the entire country actually, a warm and happy holiday. And in other news, South Korea has called on North Korea for the third time actually, to accept its offer for high-level talks. The Unification Ministry says it's regrettable Pyongyang has not given a response yet, and added Seoul wants all inter-Korean issues to be resolved through dialogue. South Korea proposed a second round of high-level talks last month to discuss a possible round of reunions for families separated since the Korean War, as well as other pending issues. The ministry said an answer from Pyongyang would be great news for divided family members ahead of the Chuseok holiday. North Korea may have reconnected its plutonium production reactor at its Yongbyon nuclear test site. This is according to the International Atomic Energy Agency. Washington says it's a clear sign that Pyongyang is not ready to denuclearize. Our Shin Se-min has more.
In an annual report posted on its website, the International Atomic Energy Agency says it has seen releases of steam and water from a reactor at the Yongbyon nuclear complex. The latest update on the plant also quoted experts that said the North could be working on making plutonium for atomic bombs. The UN watchdog said it was continuing to monitor developments at the site via satellite imagery. The reactor site has technically been out of operation for years, as North Korea destroyed its cooling tower in 2008 amid a trust-building phase with South Korea, China, the U.S., and other neighboring countries. In April 2013, the North said it would revive its old 5-megawatt reactor at the Yongbyon nuclear complex. Experts said then that it would take about half a year to revive the plant, but only if it hadn't fallen completely into disrepair. In January, the U.S. Director of National Intelligence said the North had enlarged the uranium enrichment facility and restarted the reactor as well, calling the moves a significant step in the wrong direction and a contrary move to the North's international commitments. The U.S. State Department said on Thursday that the activities signal Pyongyang's clear lack of commitment to denuclearization. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Washington has reopened the so-called New York diplomatic channel with Pyongyang to discuss the release of the 3 Americans detained in North Korea. U.S. new Chief Nuclear Envoy Sydney Seiler says this capture is a significant obstacle in improving their bilateral ties. Hwang Sung-hee has the details.
A matter of days after North Korea granted U.S. media a rare interview with the 3 American detainees, the United States said it had restarted its own diplomatic channel with the communist regime to secure their release. Speaking at a forum on Thursday, Washington's new chief nuclear envoy, Sydney Seiler, said efforts to bring the U.S. citizens home are being made through the New York channel, as well as the Swedish embassy in Pyongyang. The so-called New York Channel refers to meetings between North Korea's UN delegation and U.S. officials. Seiler noted the 3 detainees have posed significant obstacles to U.S.-North Korea ties and urged Pyongyang to act in a humane and right way. Washington may not be alone in seeking to remove these barriers to friendlier ties. Letting CNN and the Associated Press interview the 3 Americans could be Pyongyang's latest attempt to push for fresh dialogue with Washington. North Korea has a history of using U.S. detainees as negotiating chips for talks with the United States. The latest developments come a couple of weeks before North Korea's foreign minister travels to New York City for the UN General Assembly. Attention is focusing on whether his trip could bring the 2 foes a little closer together. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
North Korea is set to hold its second Supreme People's Assembly later this month. State media says the 2-day meeting will start on the 25th. And although no details were given about what will be talked about during the session, there is a speculation about a possible reshuffle of the National Defense Commission. And staying with North Korea, it's announced that it will hand back a South Korean man who illegally crossed the border into North Korea next Thursday, that is, at the Truce village of Panmunjom. While the report did not provide details about when and where Kim was arrested, it did say he had entered North Korea via a third country, and it did so because of economic hardships here in South Korea. The report also says Kim asked authorities to live in North Korea with his wife, but that they persuaded him to return home. Authorities are looking into a threatening parcel that was addressed to South Korean Defense Minister Han Min-gu. The Defense Ministry says the package included a 33-centimeter long knife, 20 grams of flour, and a letter which threatened to track down Minister Han's family and, quote, seize them. The sender said he would punish Minister Han for, quote unquote, wagging his tongue, which would bring about a nuclear war on the Korean peninsula. Authorities have released surveillance footage of the suspect obtained from a convenience store where he appears to be sending the package. Officials are trying to identify this suspect. This is not the first time, though, such package was received. A similar parcel was sent last year to Mr. Han's predecessor, Kim Kwan-jin, who is now Korea's national security advisor.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Kang Chery for a lively half hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on Arirang TV.
Human Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Thursday, finding ways to persuade. And as I said earlier in the program, people here in Korea are already in a holiday mood as this year's Chuseok is an extended 5-day holiday starting tomorrow. And of course, this is when people prep for the holiday meals. But as our Kim Ji-yeon reports, an increasing number of shoppers are said to be shying away from the country's traditional style markets.
The government have been investing billions of dollars in the nation's traditional markets for more than a decade, but the efforts don't appear to be working to counter the rise of major supermarkets. According to data collected by Saenuri Party Representative Kim An-pyo, total sales at more than 1,500 traditional markets nationwide was slashed in half in 2013 from 12 years ago to $20 billion. They're losing business to more modern supermarkets, whose total sales have been on a steady rise over recent years, hitting $44 billion in 2013. The shift has increased costs for more government support for traditional markets. More than $3 billion of government funds have been directed toward making traditional markets more accessible by modernizing their parking lots and entrances. But lawmaker Kim in his report pointed out that the money could be invested more wisely, such as by updating smartphone application software to make it easier for shoppers to find the markets and pay for their goods. He added that more research needed to be done on finding ways to help these traditional markets. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
And with that extended holiday period, many Koreans have opted to travel abroad this year. For those that do, you might want to keep in mind that starting today, duty-free limits for those returning to Korea will be raised. This move, which is part of the Finance Ministry's tax revisions, raises the duty-free allowance to $600 from $400. It's the first time the ceiling has been raised in 26 years. One of the world's leading trade shows for consumer electronics officially opens in Berlin on this Friday. The event will showcase the latest must-have gadgets, and one of the top attractions this year are said to be televisions. Hwang Jie has the details.
Some major electronics companies, including Korea's very own Samsung and LG, are set to show off their latest high-end gadgets in this year's IFA, one of the world's largest consumer electronics trade shows that's held every year in Berlin.
Of course, if you consider the trends in the TV market, it's UHD, the ultra-high definition TV sets. Of course, it's the curved TV. Brand new in the market, and every of the big manufacturers will present their own curved TV. And overall, it's the connected world, connectivity. It's the big trend for everyone in the market.
And connected devices are taking center stage.
We have a Spotify Connect speaker where you can stream music through the Spotify app. We also have various Bluetooth solutions for multi-pairing. By this I mean you can connect several Bluetooth devices at the same time and also play music.
Japanese manufacturer Toshiba is no exception, unveiling a television that acts as a digital personal assistant when you team it up with a smartwatch. It also doubles up as a mirror.
If you have this digital watch, for example, then the watch sends body mass data to the TV, so you can see how many calories you used yesterday, how many steps you took, what exercise you have to do today. The TV can tell you in the morning by looking in the mirror what the weather will be and what meetings you have.
The 5-day expo kicks off on Friday with more than 1,500 exhibitors from around the globe taking part. Hwang Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
A new report by the World Health Organization shows that one person dies as a result of suicide every 40 seconds. Economic factors are usually pointed as the reasons for these people taking their own lives. Kim Min-ji tells us more.
Over 800,000 people commit suicide worldwide every year. That means someone takes their own life every 40 seconds. A new report by the World Health Organization showed low and middle-income nations accounted for about 75% of all cases around the world. It stated the most common methods of suicide range from self-poisoning to hangings to the use of firearms. The report explained that restricting access to means of suicide is effective prevention as seen in developed countries, adding that governments need to come up with stronger measures. Only 28 countries are known to have national suicide prevention strategies. By age, the WHO said the suicide rate was the highest among those aged 70 and older, and that suicide is the second leading cause of death in young people aged 15 to 29. Margaret Chan, the Secretary General of the WHO, said the report is a call for action to address a large public health problem which has been shrouded in taboo for far too long. The WHO added that another way to prevent suicide is responsible reporting by media. The report comes ahead of World Suicide Prevention Day on September 10th, which raises awareness about suicide and suicide prevention around the world. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Korean health authorities confirmed that tests have turned out negative for a Nigerian man suspected of having Ebola symptoms. The welfare ministry here says this man is not infected with the Ebola virus. However, they may decide to conduct a second test on him depending on the results of a malaria test. The 39-year-old entered the country yesterday and was isolated for tests due to high fever. Authorities are also closely monitoring flight attendants and workers at the immigration service who have higher chance of coming in contact with those in Ebola-hit countries. And here's a story that reminded me of those protein bars made out of insects in this movie called Snowpiercer. A UN report says it may not be long enough until we see insects on our dinner plates. Here is Yurian with more.
Could we be eating insects as part of our regular diets in just a few decades? The UN Food and Agriculture Organization suggests that it might be a necessity. In a report, the agency said the world will need twice its current food supply by 2050 and said eating bugs would help stave off the effects of a crisis. And Korea is already taking steps in that direction. Officials from the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs said Thursday that a total of 7 different insects could be cleared for sale in markets, including beetles and crickets, by 2016. The insects might not just be used for food, but for medicinal purposes and pest control. It's an industry the government expects to grow to about $684 billion by 2020. Local hospitals like Yonsei Severance have already begun researching how insects could be included in patients' diets, as they're good sources of protein and are easier to digest than meat. Insects are also known to contain good fats that include calcium and iron. Yurian, Arirang News.
NATO leaders have gathered for the second day of a summit in Wales, where they're expected to hammer out deals to organize a security assistance for Iraq in its fight against Islamic State militants. For this story and other international headlines, Sun Jung-in is joining us from the news center. So Jung-in, what can we expect on day 2 of their summit?
Well, sources say NATO is expected to agree on coordinating military supplies to help Iraqi authorities with available transport aircraft. To confront the rising threat in Iraq and Syria, U.S. President Barack Obama and British Prime Minister David Cameron have called for a united front. Our Kwan So-ah has more.
NATO leaders are figuring out how to respond to Islamic State as it continues its rampage across Iraq and Syria and executes and threatens more Westerners. U.S. President Barack Obama and British Prime Minister David Cameron want an international coalition to combat the extremist group. The two leaders outlined the need to tackle the, quote, brutal and poisonous militants and urged powerful regional players like Jordan and Turkey to join the effort. Jordan's King Abdullah expressed strong support for such a coalition during private meetings, according to participants at the summit. NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen said he would seriously consider requests for assistance from the Iraqi government, adding the international community has an obligation to stop IS making further gains. The British Prime Minister told CNN that his country supports U.S. airstrikes in Iraq and could take part in them, but also made clear that other factors like helping the Iraqi government and supplying humanitarian aid is just as important.
I think sometimes people think there is no strategy unless it simply consists of airstrikes. That's not the case. What you need is a fully formed strategy to squeeze this from every angle, and that's what you're getting from this conference today.
The United States and Britain need to find partners fast to form a coalition to battle IS through military power, diplomatic pressure, as well as economic penalties. Kwon-soa, Arirang News.
Now, another key issue at the top of the NATO agenda is the ongoing conflict in eastern Ukraine, and Western leaders are displaying a unified front against Russia's aggression.
Yes, this as talks on bringing peace in eastern Ukraine are set to begin shortly in Minsk, where Ukraine, Russia, and pro-Moscow rebels will meet to seek agreement on a ceasefire. Here's our Eunice Kim with what has been achieved so far during the first day of the NATO summit regarding the crisis in Ukraine.
Amid talk of a possible ceasefire between Ukrainian forces and pro-Russian separatists, NATO leaders in Wales are voicing their support for Kiev and their opposition to Moscow. The 28-member alliance on the first day of their summit called on Russia to withdraw its troops from Ukraine and end what it called the illegal annexation of Crimea.
We strongly condemn Russia's repeated violations of international law. Russia must stop its aggressive actions against Ukraine, withdraw its thousands of troops from Ukraine and the border regions, and stop supporting the separatists in Ukraine.
While NATO leaders mull their options, they are set to announce a new round of sanctions against Russia that target the banking, energy, and defense sectors. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko is showing cautious optimism about the chances of a ceasefire. He said a truce on ending the 5-month-long conflict was contingent on the outcome of a scheduled meeting in Minsk on Friday, where envoys from Ukraine, Russia, and the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe will meet for talks. Eunice Kim, Arirang News.
And Chang-in, the recent food scandals in China are well documented, but now this country is dealing with a different type of scare.
Yeah, that's right. Some of China's biggest water brands are having to answer some tough questions about the quality of their products after authorities call them out for having unsafe levels of bacteria. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
This 19-liter water cooler bottle produced by Wahaha is China's most popular water brand. But customers may be getting a bit more than they paid for. Food safety authorities in the country said tests have revealed that Wahaha's water contains nearly 8 times more bacteria that safety standards in China allow. Another top 10 water company in China, Yibao, registered bacteria levels that exceeded 1,500 times the regulated limits.
8 popular drinkable water brands have failed to meet the safety standards.
The reason? Most of the firms were found to be recirculating their water bottles without sanitizing them. Food authorities say some firms simply filled them with tap water and did not follow proper purification procedures. Some experts have pointed out that pollution throughout the country may have been a contributing factor. In recent months, contaminated materials were brought into industrial zones in parts of the country, polluting water sources around them. The revelations have put Chinese people at ill ease, with a lack of options, as temperatures in some regions are still dealing with summer temperatures in the 30s. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Not so much to ha-ha about, I guess. And moving on, Google is facing federal charges for failing to prevent children from making purchases without their parents' consent. I hear this is the third such case about unauthorized purchases made by young kids in the U.S. So how heavy is the fine?
Well, Google has promised to pay out $19 million in refunds to parents whose credit cards were unfairly billed for purchases built into children's video games like Ice Age Village and Air Penguins. The settlement was announced by the U.S. Federal Trade Commission after thousands of complaints were filed since 2011 when the Google Play App Store allowed children to make in-app purchases that cost anywhere from 99 cents to as much as $200 without asking for their parents' consent. Google said it revised its billing practices in March so that parents are given a choice of whether or not to require a password when their kids buy virtual tools in games.
Now, on to the latest discovery made in Argentina. Scientists have excavated fossil remains of a dinosaur that are remarkably complete and well preserved, and they say it could have belonged to one of the largest dinosaurs and just maybe the biggest creature that ever walked this planet.
Yes, paleontologists say the dinosaur weighed 65 tons and measured 26 meters long with an 11-meter neck, which is the equivalent of 7 Tyrannosaurus rexes. It took them 5 years to excavate the remains of the massive animal, which were found in southern Patagonia in Argentina. This new discovered dinosaur, known as Drenatus, which means fearer of nothing, belongs to the largest dinosaur group known as Titanosaurus. According to researchers, it lived 77 million years ago in a temperate forest of South America and was so enormous that it would have been unlikely to be threatened by any other dinosaurs. The findings, featuring years of work by researchers from the US and Argentina, was published in the Nature journal Scientific Reports.
All right, Jung-in, thank you so much. Great to have you with us, and we'll see you back here in just about 2 hours. And that will do it for this edition of Arirang News. So thanks for watching.